Did you know that Super Paper Mario's script is slightly different in Europe and Australia than it is in America? Back in the Wii era and prior, games did not release globally like they do now. Instead, they would be staggered across 3 major regions. There'd be the Japanese version, the North American version, also known as the NTSC version, and the version for Europe and Australia, or the PAL region as it's called. The PAL region was typically the last one to get games out of the 3, and that was the case for Super Paper Mario as well. But it's because of this that the PAL version had a little more time in the oven. While the non-English translations were ongoing, it seems like the British localizers had some time to go over the American script and fix some issues that weren't caught before the American release. In this video, I'd like to go over some of the more major changes to the game's dialogue. The PAL version has a lot of changes compared to the NTSC version, but most of them are very minor. They're fixed typos, grammatical changes, punctuation. For some reason, the European localization team really didn't like the word mayhaps. You can see every change on my website, link in the description, but unless you're really passionate about like the Oxford comma, there's not gonna be much left for you to see after watching this video. You may be surprised to learn that Nintendo of Europe did not change any words that are spelled differently between British English and American English. The European version still spells color without a U, for example. But that's not to say there wasn't any localization to Europe at all. One of the most common differences between the American and European translations is the floors. In Europe, floors are counted differently than they are in America. Americans start counting at 1, but in Europe we start on the ground floor, and the floor above that is the first floor. Aside from the metric system, floor numbers are the main way you can tell if an English translation was localized for Europe. Sadly, it's not super common, so I'm glad we got it here. A handful of changes were seemingly made to avoid offensive terms. I say seemingly because most of these words that got replaced in the European script have a suggestive meaning, particularly in the UK, but also most of them weren't fully removed from the script. The words in question are bummer, spunky, toss, bonk, spank, screwed, piddling, peon, fanny, and shag. If you're familiar with British English, you can probably see why these words got changed. But again, they weren't everywhere. In fact, I'd say about half of their uses survived. I don't really know why that happened, but I guess if anything, it just makes the game's script more varied. Another kind of change that can be seen throughout the script is a series of name changes. The American version has several characters who share a name with another character. I'm not sure why they did that, are they all just mistakes? In any case, the European localization team changed them so that every NPC has a unique name. Firstly, there's Muffy. You can find her by the left elevator on Flipside's second floor, but when you use that elevator to go to the first floor, you'll find another character named Muffy. Not only do they have the same name, but they have the exact same appearance too. You'd be forgiven for thinking these are supposed to be the same character, just traveling between floors. However, both Muffies have a Flopsider equivalent, and these characters are not identically named. The PAL version actually renames them both because Muff could be considered vulgar too. The Muffy on the first floor was renamed to Tina. Her Flopside doppelganger was originally named Buffy, but to reflect Tina's new name, her name got changed to Nina. Meanwhile, the other Muffy was renamed to Lucy, but her Flopsider version was already called Lucy in the NTSC version, so that Lucy got changed to Lacey. I wonder why they didn't just change Muffy to Lacey instead. Next up is Chap. He's this green guy on Flipside's second floor, and the other chap is found in Flipside's milk bar. The green one's name got changed to Glim to more closely match his Flopsider's name, which is Slim. By the way, Slim shares a name with one of your pixels. This is the only shared name that wasn't changed in the PAL version. I guess you're not likely to confuse these two. Lastly, there are 2 Cragnons named Tough. One of them watches Cragavision and the other one blocks this door before you agree to help the Cragnons. After you do, he permanently disappears from the game. The tough who sticks around was renamed Scoria in the PAL version, which I think was the wrong choice. Kragnons refer to themselves by their own name, and they forgot to change this after the rename, so Scoria still calls himself tough in every interaction that he has. The other tough, on the other hand, doesn't refer to himself at all, so if he had been renamed to Scoria there wouldn't have been an issue. There's also some names that aren't duplicates but were changed for other reasons. For example, Nip and Gnaw have been renamed to Howl and Growl. Is it because Nip sounds like it's short for nibble? There are also some item name changes. Spit roast is known as roast meat in Europe, and the yellow apple has been renamed to orange apple. That's just correct. The internal name for this item is orange berry, so it was always meant to be orange. Also, in Flopside, Boudin makes a distinction between catch cards and caught cards. Catch cards are the usable items, and caught cards are cards that are filled in. Nowhere else in the NTSC version does this distinction exist, but the PAL version remains 100% consistent. Every filled in card, no matter where it's mentioned, is referred to as a caught card. On the subject of caught cards, the American version of Wacka's card describes them as sprouting pastries when whacked. I don't like this description. Whack-a-bumps being pastries, or at least pastry-like, is treated as fact by some Paper Mario fans now, but this is the only source of that information, and it's made up. The Japanese version does not say this, and the European English translation fixes this, calling them bumps. The chapters menu usually describes the events that occurred in each chapter in the second person. You know, you met this pixel, you got a pure heart. But sometimes the NTSC version changes it up and says we instead. Buddy, you're not on the team, you're a description. The PAL version sticks to the second person descriptions everywhere. When Merlee's charm activates, in the NTSC version she'll say, "Mysterious power makes you jolly, start the wheel of fun." Merlee's gimmick is that she always speaks in rhyme, so this is an oversight. It's fixed in the PAL version. "Mysterious power makes you dance, start the wheel of chance." Being a video game, Super Paper Mario has a bunch of text that explains the game's rules. Sometimes these are explicit tutorials, but this also includes titles, caught cards, and advice from NPCs. The NTSC version contains a bunch of falsehoods here. This is a speed flower, it temporarily speeds up time. You'll also earn triple points and coins while it's active.
It's a total fabrication.
It seems like only coins dropped by enemies are tripled by this effect. Maybe ones in the overworld are too. I couldn't find a speed flower in the same room as floating coins. Anyway, the PAL version makes this, while it's active you could earn triple points and coins. That's a weirdly vague fix, isn't it? The same mistake and fix is present for the slow flower too. This odd gassy creature puffs itself up and explodes.
We made this one up.
This odd gassy creature puffs itself up and exudes sleepy, freezy or poison gas, so watch out. Dark Koopa trolls dwell in a certain secret pit. Stomp them to turn them into dark shells. Shocker. Okay, this one is true enough, you can jump on them with carry, but as a spiked enemy you're not supposed to encourage the player to jump on them. Stomps won't work, but hey, they're not flame retardant. That's a Lakitu, they're odd creatures that drive around in clouds. Again, I guess this isn't completely wrong, but what a weird way to phrase it. The PAL version says they fly around on clouds. The real mistake is at the end of this title. You can stomp it, hop in the cloud and find out where it keeps all those spinies.
It's an urban legend that never happened.
That's a thing you can do in a lot of other Mario side-scrollers, but not this one. You can stomp it and send it tumbling to the ground. Tyloids vary in color and ability. This blue Tyloid is known for its curses.
It's totally made up.
Tyloids vary in color and ability. This blue Tyloid is the weak set. The Weakset? This Meow Bomb is a cat-shaped robot programmed to explode on contact.
This one was invented by a writer.
This Meow Bomb is a cat-shaped ticking time bomb. It's a Zoingoing. They're very rare, living only in the space between dimensions. I'm actually not sure if this one is wrong. These guys only appear in Castle Black and in Flipside's Pit of 100 Trials. Flipside is said to be between dimensions, but I don't know if the same is true for Castle Black. The PAL version changed it anyway. It's a Zoingoing. They're very rare creatures only a few adventurers have seen. At the end of Dark Goomba's title, Tippy says, "They are very similar to Goombas, except they are black and somewhat small."
It's false.
They are very similar to Goombas, except they are black and live in pits. That's a question block.
No way.
That's a question block that looks like a brick block. Okay, so I guess according to the game it's technically still a question block. That's a ghost shroom. Use it to summon an evil shroom to snack on your enemies. She's describing the ghost shroom item, but this title isn't for the item. It's for the evil shroom that was summoned by the item. That's a ghost shroom. It looks scary, but it can be quite helpful. I see the world beyond the orange door. I see Gloam Valley. You find the locked door in Gloam Valley. When you find it, you leave it alone and enter the pipe above it. At a certain spot within, you flip to find a hidden block you can climb upon.
We got you.
Just a complete mistranslation. She's talking about these blocks out here. To enter the pipe, you flip to find hidden blocks you can climb upon. I just heard this juicy rumor. Apparently, the hero knows a secret dimensional technique. Yeah, he uses it to flip to another dimension and find loads of interesting things. These blocks on my right might not look like much now, but if I were the hero, I might find some secret stuff behind them. And when you see coins, you can use the technique to make more of them. Again, not fully wrong. I think you get what they were trying to say here, but you don't make more of them. The PAL version explains it more clearly. And when you see coins, you can sometimes use the technique to find even more. Super Paper Mario uses the same message box system as the 1000-Year Door. In this system, the message box a piece of dialogue displays in is defined inside the message itself. It gives the writers more control without having to ask the programmers for help, but the downside is that localization can screw these up. There are some places where the American translators accidentally deleted message boxes. For example, when you try to use an elevator that's undergoing maintenance in Flipside, you get this message in a standard message box. The reason for this seems to be that they took their translation of the Flopside version and copy-pasted it into the Flipside section. But they copied it like this, missing these two tags, which sets the message box to the sign one and sets the text color to red. You can tell because this Flipside message, without any colored text at all, still has this closing tag, which tells the dialogue to go back to its default color. Which obviously doesn't do anything here because the color was never set. The PAL version gets it right. Other places where the American translators accidentally removed message boxes are this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. Even this unused dialogue had its message box reinstated, despite still being unused. And there's even one where the Japanese version itself forgot to put in the correct message box. When you reach the end of the Flopside Pit of 100 Trials for the first time, Shadow stops talking with the robotic message box halfway through. PAL corrected this as well. Howzit's dialogue has a couple of mistakes in it. You can tell the localization team didn't fully understand the purpose of each of his messages. When you store your last item in your inventory in Flipside or Downtown of Crag, Howzit makes it sound like your inventory is already empty in the NTSC version. Alright, let's store some goods. Except you don't have anything on you to store. Come on back once you do. The PAL version changes it to this. Okay, I'll hold on to this for you until you want it back. Any more goods? Oh, you don't have any more goods. Come on back once you do. In Downtown of Crag only, trying to store an item while you don't have any gives you dialogue that was clearly written for when you're trying to retrieve items from an empty storage. Look, bub, you haven't stored any goods. Next time, try storing some goods before trying to pick up some goods. Which the PAL version fixes. Look, bub, you haven't got any goods. Next time, if you want me to store something, bring some goods. And in Flipside only, when you pick up an item that fills up the final slot in your inventory, the American dialogue makes it sound like your inventory is already full. Whoa, hold up, your pockets are stuffed. Come back when you've got some room. Whereas the European version makes it more clear that your inventory is full after receiving the item. Whoa, now your pockets are stuffed. Nothing more will fit in there. Appropriately enough, Notso suffers from the exact same issues as his Flipside counterpart. Here's the one for storing your last item. Alright, let's store some stuff. Except you don't have anything on you to store. Come on back once you do. Alright, I will take your last item. Now you don't have any more items left. Come on back once you do. And the one for retrieving an item that leaves you with a full inventory. Whoa, hold up, your pockets are stuffed. Come back when you've got some room. Whoa, now your pockets are stuffed. Nothing more will fit in there. When collecting a 100th copy of a catch card from a card pack, in the American version the dialogue for this is broken. Instead of the intended dialogue, you get this message instead. This message is a failsafe that shows up when the game has failed to retrieve the correct dialogue. The PAL version fixes this error. Getting a 100th copy now gives you actual dialogue. Inside the bag lurked this card. Take it, for it is yours. Oh, but sadly you cannot. It looks as though you don't have room for this card. I shall buy this card from you for this many coins then. This text already existed in the American version too. It's simply not called correctly by the game in that version. After Chapter 1, Mario and Tippy will talk to Merlin about meeting Merlumina. This is what Merlin has to say about her. She was the one who wrote the Light Prognosticus to counteract the Dark One.
It never happened.
Later on in the game, you'll get to this room depicting 4 of the Ancients in stained glass. You can scan these windows to get lore about the Ancients depicted on them. If you tattle Merlu's window, Tippy will credit him as the author of the Light Prognosticus. Merlumina is simply described as the wisest of the sages and a leader. The PAL version removes this contradiction. She was a great leader and was revered as the wisest of the ancient sages. After finding Princess Peach unconscious in Flipside, Merlin tells you to go to Saffron to get a remedy. After you return with a spicy soup, Merlin's dialogue will update to still tell you to do that. Saffron will have a remedy. She's on Flipside's first floor. You must hurry and find her. In the PAL version, he actually reacts to your progress. Of course, a spicy soup. That'll do the trick, methinks. Give Princess Peach a sip. When you first reach Flopside, Nolrum will explain the connection between Flipside and Flopside and say, "But the only ones who know about this flip-floppery are Merlin and I."
We made it up.
Not true. Flipside has an arcade that Flopside doesn't have, and the Flopsiders are aware of this arcade. One Flopsider is even at the arcade, so they can even navigate between the two towns if they want. The PAL version changes Nolrum's line to just further elaborate on the Flipside-Flopside concept. They are the head side of the coin, we are the tails. After you place the 6th pure heart in its heart pillar, Nolrum will quote an excerpt from the Light Prognosticus to you and say, "That's in the section of the Light Prognosticus that I just deciphered." It seems like there's only one copy of the Light Prognosticus though, and it's in Merlin's house. There's nothing like it in Nolrum's house. So in the PAL version he says,
"That's in the section of the light prognosticus that Merlin and I just deciphered."
There's a curious change regarding Shadow's motives. In the NTSC version, before you fight him, he says,
"Your clones are complete. Now's when I beat you and take your place as heroes."
That's an interesting motivation. Do you think that if Shadow had actually won here, he would go on to fight Count Black in your stead? Probably not. When you defeat him, he tells a slightly different story.
"I was so very close to defeating the heroes with the power of the pixels. I almost got revenge on the ancients."
Shadow, the hero's power. It wanted the power of the pixels. The PAL version makes his motivations more clear from the start.
"Your clones are complete. Now I will destroy you and take your power for my own."
When speaking to Old Man Watchit for the first time, he'd make this kind of strange comment.
"Can't let you pass. See this little guy in my pocket? He's got something to tell you. Know what he says? Watch it, so give it up."
This was changed to,
"Can't let you pass. See this hat on my head? It's got something to tell you. Know what it says? Watch it, so give it up."
This just seems like a total downgrade to me. I don't really understand what they were going for in the American version. I guess he was just doing a weird bit. But it's also funny to think that he actually has a little guy in his pocket who says watch it.
Watch it!
In Chapter 2-2, Mimi will point you to a series of booby-trapped rooms as you look for Merlee. Once you followed her instructions and activated the trap in every room without getting the key, in the PAL version, talking to Mimi again will crash the game. It's very easy to beat the game without triggering this dialogue, so it's not a huge issue, but Nintendo thought it was serious enough to recall the game. The Wii didn't have downloadable game updates like we do now, so the only way to fix it was to mail your disc to Nintendo and they'd send you back a fixed version. Because of this recall, this crash is probably one of the most famous ones in the game, and if you've had someone explain to you why this crash happens, it probably went something like this. This text was edited to change second floor to first floor, but in that process a localizer accidentally added an O tag at the end of the message. O tags indicate that the game is supposed to call up an option prompt, like the yes or no selection boxes you'll see throughout the game. But because no such prompt exists for this scene, the game fails to call one and crashes. This is the explanation I'd find in any of the sources I would consider trustworthy, so I expected to just glance at the files, confirm the story and move on to the next change. There's just one problem: it's wrong. It can't be true because if you look at the American version and the original European version, you'll actually see that the version that crashes is missing the O tag. And the revision fixed this by adding the O tag back. I can see how this misconception started though. I'm pretty sure that in the Thousand Year Door the O tag was exclusively used to call option prompts. Because the Thousand Year Door and Super Paper Mario run in the same engine, they use the same in-dialogue tags. They're called the same thing and they do the same thing as well, including the O tag. And since there's no option prompt in this scene, clearly the text with this tag must be the one that's wrong. However, that's not actually how it works. The O tag is far more flexible than the Thousand Year Door lets on. What it actually does is return control to the game without closing the message box. The game can then execute any code it wants until it returns control back to the dialogue system. This can be creating an option prompt, but also just anything else. In fact, if you put an O tag at the actual end of a conversation, you'll go back to playing the game as normal while the dialogue stays open indefinitely, forever waiting for the game to give control back to it. You can actually see the effects of the missing O tag in the Mimi scene if you compare the original PAL version with one that doesn't have the crash. Before the game crashes, the dialogue box closes. The missing O tag means the dialogue isn't instructed to suspend itself, so instead it thinks the dialogue is finished and closes. But in any other version there's actually more text. So why is the O tag here if not to call an option prompt? Why does the dialogue need to suspend itself in the first place? Did you see it? Mimi's expression changes. That's not something the dialogue system can do, and that's why it needs to return control to the game. This is how it works across the entire game. If you see an NPC change expressions without our dialog box closing, an O tag was used to achieve this effect. So putting that all together, here's how I think the crash actually works. When you press up near Mimi, first the game sets her expression to surprised, then it triggers the dialogue. The dialogue plays out like normal until it reaches the end. Normally there's an O tag here suspending the dialogue, but not in the PAL version, so the dialogue ends. In either case, control is given back to the game's main loop. Both versions set Mimi's expression to neutral and then, on the same frame, try to resume the suspended dialogue. In the original PAL version, there's no suspended dialogue to resume, and that's what causes the crash. Oh, right, this video is about dialogue differences. One of the prisoners in 2-3 tells you why he came to Merlee's mansion in the first place.
I came to get my romantic fortune read, okay? You know, see the future for me and my gal.
Merlee doesn't read fortunes, that's what Merlovely does. Merlee's job is to cast charms, so the PAL version rewrites this one as
I came to get a romantic charm to keep things sweet between me and my gal.
When you find Merlee in 2-4, she'll say, I shine on, such is my lot, a son to those fate to me brought. This one doesn't rhyme in British English, they say brought instead of brought, so this rhyme had to be changed. I shine on like the brightest star, calling you from miles afar. The PAL version made the text here and here slightly smaller. The problem with text that's this big and shaking is that when you press A to move on to the next message, you'll still see the previous text shaking back into frame at the top. The resized text in the PAL version is just small enough to not have that issue. In the intro to chapter 5-2, the narrator says, despite their hustling pace, our heroes never caught sight of the Florosapiens.
It's a made-up tale.
Despite their hustling pace, our heroes never caught up with the Florosapiens. Also, in this chapter, you meet Kutch and he'll ask you for a motto. The American version contains a coding error that makes it check the length of your motto incorrectly. Your motto is supposed to be at least 4 and less than 8 characters long, but these numbers are doubled in NTSC. As a result, the maximum length far exceeds what you're actually able to enter, and so the dialogue for submitting a motto that's too long is not accessible in that version. That's kinda long, isn't it? Don't wanna sound stuffy. Give me something shorter. When you defeat a Samur guy called Clammy Hand, he'll warn you about his brother, Forbidden Slap. He's so badass that he even got detention once. But when you talk to Forbidden Slap, he says he was expelled, and after defeating him, his brothers convince him to rejoin the academy. So yeah, the detention thing was probably a mistranslation, and the PAL version fixes it to refer to his expulsion. Another Samur guy is called Software Pirate, and he has this to say.
Yarr! Me name be Software Pirate, barnacle-booted scourge of the 39th gate. I be plundering your bits and your bytes, and downloading them into me britches. Me treasure disks'll be full of cyber riches, after I swipe your treasure bump mapping.
Okay, he kinda lost me at the end. Treasure bump mapping? What does that mean? Bump mapping is a technique in which a 3D model is given extra lighting detail without increasing the fidelity of the model itself. So why is that a thing he would want to steal? Feels like just jargon for jargon's sake. I like this version way better.
Me treasure disks'll be full of cyber riches after I swipe your downloads folder.
The PAL version fixes an issue with Bowser in 7-2, where he didn't have a tattle before entering battle with him. You can tattle him by flipping to 3D here, but in the NTSC version, this would cause the game to call the fallback message. The tattle entry for it does exist in that version, however they forgot to translate the message ID. Because of the character encoding, the ID is now O0, C0, Q0, but in the PAL version this is changed to Koopa, causing it to correctly appear in game. Also, when you approach him as Luigi, Bowser will say,
"Hey, it's the guy in green. You're alive? But where's everyone else? What happened to Peach?"
This implies that Bowser can only see Luigi. That's a little weird because even though you're playing as Luigi, Mario is there too. I think we're supposed to interpret the heroes as traveling as a group, and the fact that we can only see one character during play as a gameplay convenience. But I don't know, maybe Mario literally isn't visible if you don't play as him. Maybe he's a little guy in Luigi's pocket right now.
Watch it!
Or maybe not. The PAL version changes this dialogue to imply that Bowser is at least aware that Mario is there.
But isn't someone missing? What happened to Peach?
Hagatha, one of the 3 hacks in Underwear Road, wants to record a TV show on tape and asks you to talk to a D-man to make sure the recorder is set to the right time. When you talk to him, he'll ask you to remind him of which show it was. If you played the American version, you'd have no way of knowing the answer because she never tells you. I don't think that's an intentional joke. She does say the title in the Japanese version. It doesn't really matter. If you tell him the wrong show, he'll just go, "Oh, really? Huh." And Hagatha has no way of verifying that you told him the right thing. Still, because this wasn't an intentional part of the translation, the PAL version puts the show's title back in. Hagra asks you to get a diet book from a D-man. If you agree, she'll teleport you there, but if you walk back to her without picking up the book, she'll have new dialogue asking you if you want her to send you back there. If you say no to this, she'll say,
"I think the D-man I lent a book to is near the entrance to Underwear Road."
"Thanks again, Sonny."
Yeah, this message displays incorrectly. The problem is that text scrolling up between messages doesn't happen automatically. This is a text effect that has to be defined inside the dialogue itself, as less than p greater than. As you can see, they originally forgot it here, but the PAL version puts it back so it scrolls normally. I can see why this was originally missed though. Who's going to not talk to the D-man as soon as they're sent there, walk back to Hagra, talk to her again, and then decline getting sent back? Hagra is the one who gives you the key, so this book thing is not optional. The American localization team got a bit lazy with Dorgai III's title. It's the exact same as Dorgai II's, but with the name swapped out. That's Dorgai III. He protects the underwear from suspicious individuals. He asks questions of those who try to pass, and rebuffs those who answer poorly.
It's fiction.
The first 2 door guys are quizmasters, but not this guy. He has a challenge for those who seek to pass. When using Tippy's guidance near the end of chapter 8-1, she'll say, "Gramby, wait." Gramby? That was last chapter, Tippy. She's actually supposed to be referring to Blumiere here. The PAL version fixes... Wait, no it doesn't. It changes everything about this message except for the part that's wrong. "Gramby, just wait a little longer. We will prevail." Those are all the changes I thought were worth talking about. The PAL version fixes a bunch of dialogue issues that existed in the American version. However, as you can tell by that last example, nobody's perfect. There are a couple of mistakes in the original translation that PAL didn't even try to fix. So, you know, if they ever remake Super Paper Mario, they should have a look at these. I mentioned earlier how the PAL version fixed some incorrect message boxes, but this one went completely unnoticed. It's a sign, but it still uses the normal speaking dialog box. There's also a sign in 1-1 that uses an incorrect message box. This one uses the system message box. That's what this one is called. Since it does actually have a specifically defined message box, it seems like this one was intentional, but it's not how sign text is supposed to look in Paper Mario. I would still call this one an outright mistake. You may remember that the Thousand Year Door had some enemies with incorrect stats listed in their title information. The PAL version caught these and changed them, but that never should have been an issue to begin with. The problem was that the Thousand Year Door hard-coded these values into the titles. What that means is they just wrote the stat values into the dialogue, so if these stats ever changed in development, they would need to be changed in the title as well. Thankfully, Super Paper Mario changed this. Titles and caught cards now fetch their HP and attack values from the enemy they belong to, so they can no longer display different numbers than what the player will experience in game. The problem is that the defense value is still hard-coded, and that's the value the Thousand Year Door titles got wrong. And as a result, it happened again. Moon clefts are stated to have a defense of 2, but it's actually 4. And unlike in the Thousand Year Door, the PAL version does not fix this. Items can have up to 3 descriptions, one for the overworld, one for item menus, and one for the dining specializer. The item menu descriptions are what I would consider the default. If the item in question is an ingredient, then the dining specializer description will add where you can find them, and the overworld version is shortened so that the description fits in one message box. You see this description when you pick the item up, and pressing any button will close this item pickup screen, so you can't scroll like you can through the other descriptions. However, they accidentally made the space food description too long. When you pick it up, you'll see an A button prompt in the corner because there's more text. This extra text is inaccessible because, like I said, pressing A closes this screen. The missing text is the same as the second part of the item menu description, so you haven't been missing out. But still, that button prompt shouldn't be there. I mentioned how, like the Thousand Year Door, Super Paper Mario has functions that can be written into the dialogue. These can determine what type of message box dialogue is displayed in, but they can also create effects like shaking text, color text, etc. The way these are placed into the dialogue is by having the instructions written between angle brackets. They're the less than and greater than symbols. The problem with this system is that it means the angle brackets can't be used as in-game characters anymore, because they're reserved for these special functions, and there's one place where the dialogue actually tries to use them. It's here. Fractal's dialogue here is supposed to look like a command prompt. After each // there's supposed to be a right angle bracket, like there would be in a real command prompt, but they're not displayed because the dialogue system can't. Maybe this is the kind of change they couldn't have made this late in development, but the solution here would have been to make the right angle bracket an image that could have been displayed like a character. That's how the Thousand Year Door and Super Paper Mario display hearts, music notes, and arrows. This Meowmate misspells puny, and Watt was misgendered in her catch card description. I'm surprised these two weren't caught in either version, especially Watt's gender. Paper Mario 64 also had a few places where she was referred to using the wrong pronouns, and those were fixed in Europe. When you speak to Harold after chapter 5, he'll say,
"You got a special someone in your life, whippersnapper? You gonna get married? Well, here's some advice. If you can't please your spouse, don't get hitched. Sometimes I just ask myself, why'd you do it, Walter? Huh? Why?"
In case you missed it the first time, this is Harold, not Walter. Walter is this guy's name. In chapter 6, when you reach Laughing Axnod's gate, the world ends. This happens in a cutscene that starts before Laughing Axnod even appears on screen, so normally you wouldn't be able to tattle him. Except you can if you flip to 3D. Tattling him there reveals they assigned the wrong tattle information to him. Tippy says this is dancing on turtles instead. This is only the case here. After chapter 6, Tippy will correctly identify him as Laughing Axnod. In chapter 7-4, there's a NIMBY named Janby and a NIMBY named Marby. These are the same person. Janby appears in chapter 7 as one of the NIMBYs you can save from being frozen. After chapter 7, Janby disappears, never to be seen again, and Marby appears out of nowhere outside of the public bathroom. Marby talks about being frozen in ice despite seemingly not being present for the events of Chapter 7, but the real smoking gun is that if you use practice codes to change your story progress without reloading the room, you'll see that Janby's dialogue turns into Marby's dialogue after Chapter 7, and the same is true for Marby in reverse. They share the same set of dialogue because they're the same person. And lastly, when you use the Pure Hearts on Count Black, Peach talks like him for some reason. What is now happening to Count Black? It seems that the translators didn't know who this dialogue belonged to and incorrectly assumed it was Black. Very surprising to me that this ended up in both the NTSC and PAL versions without getting fixed. I'm sure there's some more mistakes I didn't catch either, but yeah, that's basically everything. Even if you grew up with the American script, hopefully we can agree that the PAL version script is just better. Maybe you won't agree with all of the changes, I don't either, but it is mostly just fixing mistakes that the original translators missed. That's not something we see a lot of anymore in modern games. These days, games release globally, so there's no additional time for a second translation pass. We either get a completely separate translation or we just get the American text in our games. If a game is voice acted, it's probably the latter. But at least change the floor numbers in Europe, man, I'm begging you.